going right now, so we're going to stay at the podium and include those that are on the Zoom. And we're recording this as well.
Can you ask real quick though, for that FAQ you bring down? Can you hear me on Zoom?
Can you hear me on Zoom?
And type yes and then. There.
Okay, super. All right, thank you.
Sorry for those on Zoom who were maybe trying to listen into Ruth's introduction, but couldn't hear Ruth. We were just discussing all the work that Green Bellevue is trying to do in the coming years on restoring natural landscapes to the Bellevue area, and also just, generally promoting the idea of having a greener future for Midwest residents in general. So I'm here today to introduce Bob, who's been really amazing resource learning about natural plants and all the nerdy black holes you can go down in regards to learning about our natural world around us. He's the Horticulture Program Coordinator at the Nebraska Statewide Arboretum. I've learned so much from him, and I know that everyone else who's able to see this presentation today is going to learn a lot of fun stuff and probably waste a lot of time in the coming weeks Googling things and researching things we really don't have time to research. So I'm very excited to have him here. Let's give a warm welcome to Bob Henrickson.
Hey, you didn't give a shout out to your podcast.
No, I didn't.
Yeah, so what she's referring to is getting together with Stephanie. Gosh, what did we do it 3 times last year, something like that?
Yeah,
I think.
our native wild edible plant series.
Yeah, so check that out. We talked all about native wild edible plants, and we're not done yet, right? I don't think.
Hope not.
Yeah, I don't think we've made it through them all. There's so many to choose from. So yeah, I'd love to come back and talk to you guys sometime just about wild edible plants in general, not just fungus among us. And we're going to talk about, there's lots of fungus among us. A lot of people are interested in mushrooms, but it's like, right? Oh, what if it's poisonous? Well, I appreciate you having me today. I've been with the Nebraska Statewide Arboretum since the year 2000, so a long time. We're just finishing up building a new greenhouse, so we're excited about that and hope to see some of you folks or all of you at the our big premier plant sale spring affair every year. That's always the last weekend in April 25th through the 27th. So anybody ever been to spring affair before? Oh, right. Yeah, I see some hardcores. All right. Well, anyway, looking forward to it and seeing your smiling faces there for the largest plant sale here in certainly in Nebraska. All right. So little background with me. Why am I interested in wild edible mushrooms? Well, I'm interested in wild edible plants in general. And for me, my interest goes way back, even as a kid. But if you talk to young people today, why are you interested in wild edible plants? I was surprised to hear a 20-something say, well, because I'm broke and the food is free. And I was like, oh, okay, that's a good reason. That's a good reason. I always thought a wild edible plant or wild edible mushroom would be like, you're kind of desperate, right? You're hungry, man. I'm broke. I don't have any money. It's survival food, right? Maybe like eating cardboard with a little salt on top. But I've learned that wild edible foods, particularly wild edible mushrooms, are gourmet fare. In fact, my friends and I get together. We often say, I wonder what the rich people are eating because we're eating 5-star tonight. Imagine now basically having a mushroom nosh is what it's called, where we gather and we have a friend that used to own a business called Nebraska Mushroom out in Grand Island. Nebraska's only commercial mushroom growing facility was out in Grand Island. Unfortunately, he had to close his business because COVID kind of shut him down. His main market was restaurants, and they kind of shut it down. And so hopefully that starts up again, because I was proud to say Nebraska actually has someone that'll grow shiitakes for you. You're not going to find shiitakes out in the wild, right? But do you guys ever go to any Asian markets in town? I imagine Omaha has quite a few. You see a good assortment of mushrooms, right? And one of them is oyster mushroom. And that's one of our favorites. The image you're seeing here today was a great harvest day. Oh gosh, a number of years ago, we would gather every Sunday. We called it going to church. We go out to Wilderness Park in Lincoln, which is a kind of a wild park. You could kind of compare it a little bit to Fontenelle, where it's not, swing sets and lawn chairs, but a wild park and lots of down trees. And it's funny now when I walk through Wilderness Park, I used to make fun of how many down trees they had. Now I want more, because dead trees equals more mushrooms. And the trees that might die and fall are usually, Siberian elms anyway. So we don't care if they die, right? Just go ahead and die and it'll save more room for the oaks. But I encourage you to get out there because one of the reasons it's a good thing to do is it's an excuse to get out in nature. And we all need more of that, right? So we're hunters and gatherers by trade. We kind of still hunt a little bit, but the gathering part has kind of gone away. But it's innate in our humanness is to gather things. We like to do it. So if you're learning about wild mushrooms, and it's not complicated, you guys, it really isn't. See if I can advance this. Why isn't it advancing for me? Oh, sure enough. Just click on the screen. Now do it. There we go. Do I have to click on the screen every time? Okay, very good. All right, well, I just first want to get a shameless plug to a radio show I host in Lincoln. You can get it online at KZUM. Just remember those call numbers, kzum.org. You can listen live anytime, all day. Great music on there. It's kind of Nebraska's only non-commercial radio station, so I'm proud to be affiliated with KZUM. All the other stations out there pretty much owned by big conglomerates that tell you what you have to play. So KZUM, it's all run by volunteers, including myself, that basically comes there. I have a gardening show, and it's kind of a non-conventional gardening show that we're not advertising fertilizers or pesticides or insecticides or what do I do with this garden problem. We're celebrating gardening, meaning how to grow things rather than how to kill things. All right, so first we have to kind of decide what are mushrooms and why are they important? Mushrooms are incredibly nutritious. And in fact, my wife and I, Pat's been a vegetarian for 37 years. And, when we got together, I was kind of like going, man, I got to be a vegetarian now. Well, at least at home I am. So I'm probably a vegetarian 70% of the time. But we pretty much have mushrooms with every meal because it's, if mushrooms aren't acting as that meat substitute for my texture, it's tofu, right? And I love tofu. So anyway, they're incredibly good for you. So anyway, most of the soil, without mushrooms, basically we have dirt. The fungi in the soil is what makes the soil alive. So without fungi, we're doomed, much like we hear pollinators being in trouble. Without pollinators, we're doomed. But fungus is equally important. And if you go around anywhere USA, most of the soils we have aren't very alive anymore. When we put in a new development and we scrape off all the topsoil, bring up all the subsoil to build the basement, that's spread out in everybody's yard, and then you're told to garden in it, right? So basically that soil's dead. So may the first crop you grow always be the soil. And think of fungi, that mycorrhizal relationship that you're not going to get in the soil without it being alive. So the lack of mycelium in the soil is what causes desertification because dirt alone doesn't retain the water needed for plant life. Nothing lives without support from mushrooms. It is the earth and in many respects the forebear of mankind. Isn't that a cool statement? Who would have thought fungus was so important? Using fungi to remove or neutralize environmental pollutants like oil is a technique called mycoremediation. Mushroom mycelium is being used to create insulation, foam-like packaging, home building materials. Just Google it, mushroom mycelium for building blocks, mushroom mycelium to replace drywall. Maybe you are into using hemp as a replacement for what we're currently using in a lot of our building materials. And for some reason, hemp's not going anywhere. We don't want to talk about that, right? Why it's not going anywhere. It's legal to grow hemp, but why isn't it showing up? There's roadblocks that the growers are meeting. But this mushroom mycelium, they're doing to create products like the leather of seats in a car, a leather jacket that looks like animal skin, but it's actually made from mushroom mycelium. And get this, how cool is this? If you make building material, it's very fire resistant as well. So and it has an incredibly high R value. So it just makes a lot of sense. Wouldn't it be cool to have a factory in Omaha that's growing mushroom mycelium? There's one in California. I think there's another one somewhere in the United States. So it's people are working on it. They have a plethora of antiviral and antibacterial agents and have been shown to fight cancer, diabetes, high blood pressure, of course, influenza and smallpox. So maybe you've heard of drinking chaga tea, mushroom tea. That's very in right now. Just know if you consume any mushrooms, you're getting those benefits. It may not have the same benefit as a chaga tea, but all mushrooms are good for you. Here's that building material I was kind of talking about. That gal there in the picture, Katie Ayers, William Ash Gordon, she's up in Seattle now. I'm not sure how close she is to getting her PhD, but I think the plan is to move back to Grand Island. And her boyfriend at the time, I don't even know if they're still together, but William Ash Gordon, we call him Ash for short. He was Nebraska Mushroom. So we're hoping when she's done with school, they come back and team up and create an awesome business. But she grew that boat out of mushroom mycelium. And you might say, well, why would you grow a boat out of mushroom mycelium? Doesn't make a lot of sense because once it absorbs water, it's going to sink, isn't it? Right? I think she just wanted to prove that you can even put something on the water and it'll float. So basically the mycelium grows through a mold that they made that was shaped like a boat. Pretty cool. And then you see the building blocks there, and then that leather-like material that can be made from mushrooms that looks just like leather, or of course, packing material that eliminates the need for styrofoam and plastic. And the packing material is really intriguing to me because then you could just take that block, throw it in the compost, right? How cool is that? Okay, what is a wild mushroom? Mushrooms are technically a macrofungi, and macrofungi are all have in common is they form structures called fruiting bodies or sporocarps. These sporocarps are typically the above ground part that we're all seeing. But below ground, there's a matrix of fungal hyphae working through the ground, right? So you can see that hyphae that grows down below the ground shoots up that fruiting body, the spore producing part of the mushroom. That's what we're all harvesting. And I think the concern always is, can I over harvest mushrooms? Will I deplete the population? Well, that mycelium down below ground is making sure that mushroom is all around. It's just waiting for the optimum conditions. Like maybe you're a morel mushroom hunter, any morel people in the audience, you can go back to your favorite spot every year and you're not depleting the population. What's often depleting it is the conditions aren't right? It's too dry in early May, too dry in late April. Oh, maybe it's chilly. And then all of a sudden we get up to 89 degrees and 40-mile-an-hour wind and on May 5th, right? Those are the things. So most of the time when you're even harvesting that fresh mushroom, it's already spored out. So you don't have to worry about that. And a lot of people will say, if I'm collecting, you collect it in a container that has holes in it, like an onion bag, to allow the spores to release. And this fella, Ash Gordon, told me that when you pull up to a place to mushroom hunt, make sure you circle around the parking lot first, because that's where you'll typically find them, simply because people are taking their cash back and dropping spores near the parking lot. How cool is that? So the tiny reproductive units called spores are formed, and the spores of macrofungi act like seeds in a plant. They're dispersed by the sporocarp, and if the spore lands on a suitable spot, it will produce mycelia, and eventually that may form a new sporocarp. In a typical mushroom, the spores are produced on the surface of the gills on the underside. I'm probably telling you something you already know. Well, for identifying mushrooms, the mycologists out there will use what's called a spore print, because every mushroom has a different spore print. And it's kind of fun to do at home. If you just harvest a mushroom, a fresh one, take it home and put it on a clear piece of paper or a white piece of paper and wait. End of the day, maybe wait 24 hours and you go pick that mushroom up and it'll leave a print like this, all those spores dropping right on the paper. And there's actually artists out there that use this to create some really cool art. So if you type in mushroom spore print art, you'll say, wow, that opens a new avenue, because nothing makes fractals like plants, in my opinion. While a single mushroom spore can't be seen by the naked eye, a pile of many spores can, and the color of mushroom spores is a crucial ID feature. And of course, obtaining a spore print can be an essential step. I've only used it once, and I'll talk when we get to that mushroom why I did. Mushrooms frequently make their own spore prints in nature. If you ever notice color dusting a colored dust covering a leaf or the ground beneath the mushroom's gills, or maybe you've seen those spore prints literally on top of another mushroom if it's in a cluster. Often it looks like a white film or maybe even like a light brown film on top of the mushroom. And you're wondering, do I have to dust that off? No, it's fine. Tiny clustered mushrooms frequently leave those spore prints on one another. And we'll see examples of that as we move forward. Here's a good example of it. This is honey mushroom. And honey mushroom, I didn't know about. I'll talk more about it as we dive in deeper. A friend turned me onto this one, and it's probably one of the most common mushrooms in North America. If you Google images of honey mushroom, it's very common out in Oregon. And you'll see pictures when there's a mushroom explosion out there where it's literally covering the ground. And there's dispute out there, what's the largest living organism on the planet? Some folks say it's a blue whale. Well, we know, there's trees that are bigger than that, right? What is it called? General Sherman, the giant redwood out in California has the most mass. But the largest living structure is the honey mushroom because of the mycelium that's growing underground. If you harvested all that, dried it, weighed it, it would be more than any other critter on the earth, including the quaking aspen, which often gets heralded as the most abundant because the root system of aspens all is connected together, right? But you can see on this cluster that white film on top of the mushroom that, again, somebody might say, well, is there something wrong with it? That's the spores from the mushroom above it that you're seeing. They're low in calories, high in fiber, contain many important vitamins and minerals, and some also have medicinal properties such as complex carbohydrates that strengthen the immune system. So they're basically just good for you. And one of the things mushrooms has that we humans, I think, did we find out with COVID, they say a lot of people were lacking vitamin D, right? That you should be upping your vitamin D intake. And what the main way we get vitamin D? The sunlight, right? So a lot of us were confined indoors while they're telling us to go. The last time I checked, I went outside a lot during COVID, and nobody was out and around and get plenty of vitamin D. But mushrooms are the natural source for you to get vitamin D. And indeed, Ash Gordon told me when you get home with your mushrooms, say you're drying them, like whatever, maybe you're getting them from the store and you're drying some shiitakes, whatever turns you on, lay them out in the sun for a while because that'll actually absorb more vitamin D in that mushroom before you consume it. It's a good thing to do. Mushrooms are the only fruit or vegetable source of this critical so-called sunshine vitamin. Like humans, mushrooms produce vitamin D when exposed to sunlight. So it's just a good thing. Every year, a very, very small number of people die from eating wild mushrooms. And I'll show you the one that is the most common poisonous one that people make a mistake on here in North America. Before embarking on a mushroom foray, precautions must be taken. Of course, I can't overemphasize enough the importance of adhering to a field guide or professional mycologist. And that's a fancy way of saying somebody that knows their mushrooms, and it becomes very easy after that, you guys. So many of us have enjoyed golden brown sauteed mushrooms, right? But often we saute mushrooms at home, we come up with a soggy mess. So if you ask people, especially kids, why don't you like mushrooms? 9 out of 10 times it's a textural thing. Wouldn't you say? It's like eating mush. And usually your first introduction to a mushroom is that nasty, I love button mushrooms, but taking a button mushroom, covering it in that coating and deep frying it, and then you bite into it, it's like a splash of water, like dirty water. So you give that to your kid and the kid's like, no, I don't like mushrooms. Okay, so what Ash taught me is I was cooking them wrong all these years. The way they get that nice brown edge caramelization in a restaurant, first of all, is because they have a flat top. You don't, right? So it's spread very far out. Usually in the saute pan, we're crowding them too much. So they're on top of each other. And there's a lot of moisture in those mushrooms. So as you're cooking them down and they're shriveling down, now they're not touching anymore, but you should start literally with a single layer so they're not all bunched up. And that's the best way to do it. And put the heat on low and slow, maybe low, medium, and forget about it for a while. Stir it every once in a while. What you're doing is steaming that water out of there first before you add any oil. And that oil could be in the form of olive oil or butter or a combination of the two, whatever turns you on for your oil. But once you get rid of that water, then I crank up the heat more like to medium high. And then I'll add a splash of olive oil. And then all of a sudden things are rocking. And now I'm getting a nice browning on that mushroom. And then I'll add some garlic towards the end so I'm not burning my garlic, right? And that mushroom like sucks up all that garlic flavor. And you're eating high in the hog. The thing with wild mushrooms is they can't be consumed raw. They have to be cooked. So don't just go out in the field and say, oh yeah, wild edible mushroom, you know, and eat it. No, you got to cook them. There's too much bacteria going on in the wild. Many creative ways to incorporate wild mushrooms into dishes. You know, what I like to do though, the reason I saute them separately is the reason I just told you. If you put them in with everybody else, you're just going to have a soggy mess and nobody's going to like your dish. One of my favorite way of using wild mushrooms is a pizza topping. I love them in stir fries. That's probably the top two, but they're great in soups, omelets, you name it, whatever you like mushrooms with. And here's kind of this is the wild edible mushrooms of Nebraska. So you can break out your cell phone and take a picture. So I didn't actually count, what do we got here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 15 different mushrooms is all you have to learn. And think about how many different plants you know right now, right? You know irises, you know daylilies, you know hostas. Okay, we all have known those for years, but there's other plants you know too. So make it a point to say, I'm going to get to know these intimately. And how you get to know them intimately is finding them first, right? And getting out there into a wooded area, you know, pick your favorite spot. And what we found is you're not going to find them unless you're looking. Right? They're not just going to come out and jump out at you. So going out once a week, because people often ask, when's the best time to go? We have found oyster mushrooms in January, February, December, November, October. You're not going to find morels in January, mind you, but we know we have a chance to find oysters. And we'll start looking, because what happens to us, right, when we get highs of 60 degrees after a low of minus 19, we tend to go out in nature, don't we? So rather than just going out and walking on the sidewalk, we go to a wild area and look for mushrooms because all they need is 2 or 3 days and they'll kick out of highs in the 60s, lows in the 30s. They'll do that for you. So we'll go through all of these now. So there's the king, right? Everybody loves morel mushrooms. And I can tell you that oyster mushroom that we go out and collect, I like better than morels, and everybody loves morels. So the morel mushroom is actually not a true mushroom. A basidiocarp is what we call a true mushroom. The classic, you know, cap with a stem is that. But you look at these things, they don't even look like mushrooms, right? So I'm wondering who was brave enough to eat them for the first time. And the thing with morels too is, you know, they can, if it's in a sandy area and the wind's blowing, they can often have sandy grit in those gills. So you have to kind of soak them to kind of get that grit out. So it falls out. And love the morel mushroom. The thing about them is you have to know a friend of a friend of a friend to get you on their property that typically has morels, right? And they're not going to give their secret away to you. You'd be lucky to befriend somebody that has property along the Platte or the Missouri or the Elkhorn. Become their best friend, because then they'll invite you out morel mushroom hunting. But this is actually those are actually my hands holding that harvest. This I collected from a friend that really didn't like mushrooms. And he said, I have him on my property. And he lived just on a, I guess you could call it a small acreage, a 1 acre property on the edge of Lincoln, had a lot of trees and some water in there. And he said, yeah, I've seen morel mushrooms before. So he calls me one year when I got quite a few. So I was happy to get that literally on Lincoln city limits. So that's pretty cool. Yeah, so here we go again with cooking the mushrooms properly. You know, prepare them in a dry skillet on low, medium, low heat, season with salt and pepper. And I like to season them when they just started getting that moisture, because then it's able to absorb a little bit of that salt. Cook, stirring occasionally until all the water is released, and then increase the heat. Add butter or olive oil into caramelized and golden brown. And it's nice when some mushrooms you'll have a little thinner, some are a little thicker. The thicker ones will have that caramelized brown edge with a little texture inside, gives you a little bit of meaty texture. It's really awesome. A heavy pan, I think, is important. We really cook with nothing else but cast iron at home. A heavy pan not only provides even heat, it also retains that heat so its temperature won't drop very much when you start putting food in it. Get the pan hot before you put anything in the pan. Heat the pan over medium heat and cook the mushrooms a handful at a time. That's why I say cook them first and set them aside and then add them back at the end. And so that's how you get that nice caramelized color on a morel mushroom rather than feeding somebody what looks like a soggy wet blanket. For storing them is also important. Preparing sliced or diced mushrooms. If you just slice them up and put into a freezer bag and freeze them like that, they're not going to be the same. You have to blanch them first to just like you would do green beans or any other item that you put in the freezer. You have to stop that process. Otherwise, they'll kind of turn tasteless in that bag. So we'll blanch them by adding boiling salted water for up to 3 minutes. Drain them well on newspaper. I usually do. First, I'll drain them in the colander and then I'll put them on a newspaper until they surface dry, because that way I'm not forming any ice crystals in my bag. And then I just use the quart bags and then I'll flatten out the mushrooms like that so they stack really easy. So I don't have these round bags in the freezer, so I can stack them up. And yeah, we have mushrooms still from last fall and last summer in the freezer. Of course, you can dry them as well, put them in your food dehydrator and they dry very well as well. Okay, probably the most common mushroom, and you guys have probably all seen the wood ear, right? Growing out there where you wonder, what's that funky looking mushroom? Oftentimes wood ears will appear literally the day after a rain or the day of a rain. So it's good to go on a misty day. Say we got 1 inch of rain and the day after it's still kind of drizzly, or maybe 2 days after. You go out hiking that day because nobody else is, because they're too wimpy to go out during a drizzle or a light rain. That's when you're going to score your wood ears. And they're fun to score. You can see where it gets its name from, right? Kind of looks like an ear. Now, they don't look like that all the time. And if you go to Chinese food markets, they sell what's called black fungus. That's just another species of wood ear that grows in China. So it's a cosmopolitan species, meaning it grows throughout the world. Do you have a question back there? Oh, you're just getting your coat off. Okay. Modern research into possible medical applications have variously concluded that it is anti-tumor, hypoglycemic, anticoagulant, and cholesterol-lowering properties. That sounds like it's something you should put in soup every day. Seems like the Chinese kind of got this figured out with this black fungus, don't they? Cooking it every day, along with fresh garlic and fresh ginger. Last time I checked, fresh garlic is really good for you, right? How about ginger? Good for you too. How about turmeric, right? The difference is those cultures cook with them every day. We grab salt and pepper every day, right? So that's where we need to change our diets up. You know, they say an apple a day keeps the doctor away. I say a pinch of ginger and garlic and turmeric and mushrooms keep the doctor away, right? All right. Yeah. So what you're seeing there, you guys, is freshly harvested, washed, ready to be put in the food dehydrator. And there happens to be an oyster mushroom with them. So disregard that white guy. He's just an oyster hanging out with them. But when you basically have them like that, I'll stack them up and then I'll cut them into ribbons and then saute those ribbons. So you see sauteed ribbons in that picture. And then you can just sprinkle that over salad or sprinkle anything you want that crunch. It's almost like a black wood ear potato chip, if you will. It's pretty good. I think it's a beautiful mushroom when it's at its prime. Coming across a cluster of that always makes me really happy because they dry so easily. So once you take them home and dry them, I've got some in a gallon bag that I've had for 1.5 years now because I went out when the timing was good and I harvested all I could, meaning I was swimming in black wood ear mushrooms and dried them because I knew it may be weeks or months or maybe even a year before I have a harvest like that.
So just to be clear, you cook them before you dry them?
No, not in this case. I'm glad you asked that, Stephanie, because yes, all other ones I would blanch. But this one I just washed. That's why it looks wet like that. And then I dry them as such. But I'll show you. I think the next pic shows or down the line. But that's you guys have all seen these on trees, right? Out in the woods, more than likely. dry prepared mushroom pieces outdoors in the sun, then finish in a food dehydrator. So again, putting them out in the sun is getting that vitamin D, or the lowest setting in the oven works. Store crispy dry pieces in airtight freezer bags for up to a year or more. So that's what they look like dry. And then I don't have a picture of it, but I can take a handful of those, you guys, and put them in warm water. And within 5 minutes, maybe 10, they've completely rehydrated and they look the same size as the day I harvested them. It's kind of cool, actually. Same color and everything. And then I cut them in ribbons and cook them up, or I'm putting them in a stir fry and cooking them up, that type of thing. Right. So I'm drying them fresh. I could cook them first and then dry them, but I just found, why bother? This is kind of the quick approach of doing it. And then they can use, probably their best use is stir fries, but certainly a lot of Asian soups use the black fungus or the wood ear mushroom. They're great in any sort of pasta dish. Probably my favorite use for them, though, those ribbons, is in egg rolls. We have a Filipino lady in Lincoln that makes these to die for egg rolls at the farmer's market. So we always stop and get them. And so, of course, I took a bite of it and look and see what she has inside there. And I said, what is that ribbony looking brown thing? And she goes, oh, wood ear mushroom. And I was like, huh, really? She goes, yeah, that's all I use. Wood ear mushrooms and the thin rice noodles, you know, it's kind of your filler for your egg roll. Some cabbage, of course, can be thrown in there, but yeah, good stuff. Have you ever bumped into this mushroom before? Anybody? It's one of these, man, you got to be like really looking for. And that's my little dog's nose there. It's funny, I bent down to take a picture of it and she comes right around the corner and sticks her nose there. So the timing was perfect. I didn't train her to find dead man's fingers like they train hogs to find truffles. Yeah, so what a cool plant. That white tip you're seeing there, that is the dead man's fingers at its prime. The one there with the dog face, that is past its prime. So I didn't harvest that. It was too old and brittle to eat. But go figure, this thing's edible. And it took me to be a little brave to eat this, you know, because all the sources said yes, and there was no misidentifying it with a poisonous lookalike. And that's really what you got to look for. There's lots of websites out there that talk about mushrooms, and if it has a poisonous lookalike, they'll say, you know, they'll distinguish the difference between the two. This one has no poisonous lookalike. But anyway, you can shave them raw or serve them over something hot like a bowl of pasta. And so I tried it after cooking them up, and I thought it tasted just very earthy. You know, think about it when they do truffles. Oftentimes they'll finish a dish by shaving the truffle over the dish and charge you, you know, $29.99 for that dish because they shaved a little bit of truffle over it, right? I think one of the most beautiful edible mushrooms, and if you come across this bird, first of all, you need to high five whoever you're with because you just scored a masterpiece. I mean, how did nature produce something so beautiful? I thought it looked like coral, like growing at the bottom of the ocean. And in fact, one of its common names is the coral mushroom. And completely edible, tasty. We actually took this mushroom home that night, sliced it up and had it over a pizza. And the friend, we had this pizza on the grill, and the friend that had it still says it's like the best pizza he's ever had in his life. What a cool mushroom. Not very common, but again, it's out there in Nebraska. This is actually pictures taken in Wilderness Park outside of Lincoln. The comb tooth. There it is where it's sliced up and fried, golden brown. And that's my hand there. So you see the picture you're looking at, it wasn't a very big mushroom, right? It's only about 4 by 4 inches there, but very dense. It had some weight to it. This one, you can also find in Nebraska, but again, not very common. The bear's head or the bear's tooth is another name for it. So there's 4 species of bear's head throughout North America, and all of them are edible and among the safest and most unmistakable mushroom. But again, at first glance, you'd look at this thing and go, no way is that edible, right? Give me a break. But then you stick your nose in it and smell it, and it's like, it smells earthy and tasty. And it was. Another beautiful mushroom, Has anybody seen this out in the woods before? Yeah, a lot of people have seen this. Did you ask yourself, first of all, what are you? And probably second of all, I wonder if I could eat it, right? Yeah, they're perfectly edible. And a lot of mushroom hunters, it's their favorite. I would say for me, it's probably number 4 on my list of faves. But it's called chicken of the woods for a reason. Now, you know how it is, tastes like chicken, right? No, not quite, but it definitely has a texture like chicken. That's for sure. But it's a beautiful mushroom. And if you look here closely at those fans, you can see they're kind of dusted with white. That means it's already spored out. And I'm looking at this plant or this mushroom, and it's funny, if you're with a group of people, everybody's breaking out their cell phones like it's a rock star. And I've been standing back before going, it's past its prime. It's like, I wouldn't bother. It'd be like eating cardboard, and they're all excited to take it home. And I might get in the ear of somebody and say, don't let this be your judge of chicken of the woods because it's past its prime. What does that mean? You should just leave it. This to me is the prime. Do you see how the tips of that chicken of the wood are still kind of fat? And if you take your fingers and squeeze them, it has some give to it, kind of spongy, if you will. Whereas if they fan out and are flat like that, they can still be good. Don't get me wrong, but you're just going to want to kind of feel, and does it have a lot of bend to it or give to it? If it doesn't, yeah, just walk away and admire its beauty in a photograph. So it's kind of a warm weather mushroom. Probably I would say it's kind of a summer mushroom, if you will. Bright orange. They stick out like a sore thumb. So if you're walking on a trail, what I usually look for on the trail is the bright orange is going to stick out, or a white mushroom is going to stick out easily too, right? You look for the whites of their eyes is basically what we say. But unless you get off the path and go on the backside of a down log, you never know what you're passing by, right? If I passed by a down log like this one, it might be on the backside of that log and I would have walked right past it, right? So it teaches you to kind of get off the trail and check every trunk or check every down tree. After about an hour of doing that, you get a little lazier, I must admit. The key is timing. I can't stress enough how important it is to get the youngest chicken of the woods that you can. They grow pretty fast. As they can grow, they get tough and leathery or riddled with little bugs, because bugs know how good the mushrooms are too. Look at that one, still all fat, not all fanned out. It's one of the safest, widely available mushrooms out there. And if you catch them at the right time, they're some of the most delicious. They are parasites decomposing or infecting living trees, eating them from the inside out. They begin fruiting in the beginning of the summer, will continue into the fall. What we mean by that, you guys, you can actually find chicken of the woods in the city because it'll kind of show you that this tree's dying. Like maybe there's a wound on the tree from a car hitting it, and 10 years have passed, and you can see there's kind of the bark is missing on one part of the tree, or there's a dead branch up here, so half the tree is dead. It'll actually take advantage of that open area on that tree where the bark isn't. And maybe you've seen that. For an arborist, seeing this mushroom on a half dead tree is a sign that we should take this down because it's got dead wood on the inside. So the mushroom, in my opinion, is just doing the tree a favor, saying, thanks for the nutrients, buddy. We'll see you on the other side. That's my friend Brian. And notice he's all proud of getting that chicken of the woods. But again, Brian he loves chicken of the woods. I'm sure he ate it. But to me, that baby was past its prime. You're seeing the underside of it. That's why it's yellow. So to freeze these, there's a couple ways of doing it. You can blanch them. But Brian, that you saw there in that picture, taught me a better way. He sautés them first. So he basically, rather than cutting them, just strips them. And they strip apart. You can see there in the picture, I just stripped apart by hand rather than using a knife. And they pull apart. It looks like chicken meat. And then I blanched those for 3 minutes in boiling salted water. And now they're draining on the newspaper. And then I just bag them up like that and freeze them as such. The one on the left was sauteed in butter. Of course, you can add herbs, the good pungent herbs like thyme and sage and rosemary go very good with mushrooms. You don't have to brown them. You just want to remove the water, then putting them in the freezer, making sure to add plenty of butter or fat to the mushroom since it will ward off freezer burn. And then when you pull them out, you finish your sauteing and doing that browning part. You're just cooking them enough to get the water out, if that makes sense. But yeah, very popular mushroom amongst foragers and just makes a fantastic meat substitute in any dish. And a very colorful addition to any dish as well. One of the best ways to cook a chicken of the woods is on the grill. So these were basically harvested fresh, marinated, probably some soy sauce, a little balsamic vinegar, little fresh garlic, whatever, some herbs, and then pull it out of that marinade and grill it. It is the bomb. Probably the best way to cook a chicken of the woods, in my opinion. Gorgeous mushroom. And there again, you see that break in the bark, right? You see where there was a branch that broke off. And oftentimes when I'm hiking in the woods, because as you're hunting for mushrooms, you start to gain the eye, meaning somebody that's not hunting mushrooms might walk right past it, and you point it out and they go, I walked right past it. How did I not notice it? You start looking for half-dead trees, because those half-dead trees, especially oaks, could have something growing at the base, out of the root system, that type of thing. A great mushroom that is kind of not very well known, unfortunately, is rooster of the woods. There's also hen of the woods, and I'll show that when they look very similar. Another name for this one is black staining polypore, and it grows at the base of dead or dying hardwoods like oaks, or occasionally on stumps. It'll fruit again at the same location, so you can go back and check it. And I harvested this one year. I thought it was a hen of the woods, and I'll show you that one next. Took it home and blanched it, and the water turned black. And I was like, sorry, not going to do it. Not going to trust it, even though a friend told me it was just a black staining polypore. And I'll show you what they mean by calling mushrooms a polypore. When we're out mushroom hunting and somebody says, ooh, what's that? We often say, oh, just another polypore. And the not mushroom person kind of rolls their eyes going, whatever, what's a polypore? We'll show you coming up. Anyway, it's edible, but you have to get this mushroom when it's young. What I did when I blanched it and got that black water was it was past its prime. Yeah, it's the only mushroom that bruises black when handled. The black bruising also adds to the perceived unpalatability of the species. Few people like to eat black food. I was included. But it's got a cousin called hen of the woods. And hen of the woods, as you can see, is a lighter color, more or light tan color, if you will. This is 5-star. There are people in the Ozarks and Eastern United States that make it a business to hunt these mushrooms. And much like the American ginseng is harvested and shipped overseas for big dollar, people will hunt these mushrooms and sell them to high-end restaurants because the chefs want them. They are a choice, wild edible, funky mushroom. Each one of those is about the size of a football, but if you picked it up, it weighs like 2 pounds. It's pretty cool. And then that cluster that you see, kind of the layers kind of folding in on each other, you just kind of break them apart like that. And then I can take this piece and break that into 2 or 3 more pieces, right? So I just grab it and don't even use a knife. I just peel them and shred. So that is me with the biggest one we've ever found. And you see I'm next to a bur oak stump. This oak was cut down. We were out hunting. I don't think I have Eric in the picture, but Eric, a dude that wanted to learn more about edible mushrooms, was out with us that day. And he's like, yells at me off in the distance, hey, Bob, come over here. I'm not sure what I found, but check this out. And I come and I see it and I go like, Eric, and he's like, what am I high-fiving you for? You just hit the mother lode. You may not find a mushroom like that your whole lifetime. Dude, that was a 30-pound mushroom, that little guy right there that you guys are seeing. And we brought it to the farmer's market because that Ash Gordon I was telling you about had a booth at the market. So we wanted to confirm, first of all, what we got. And he said that thing was worth $1,500.
Wow.
And so my friend Brian posted it on Facebook and told everybody what the value was. And a friend's like, dude, what are you going to do with it? Eat it. I thought it was classic, Brian. I thought it was great. No, I'm not selling it. I'm eating it. But yeah, that's why there's business. It's a business in the Ozarks and out east where they have more bur oak hickory or oak hickory woods. Here in Nebraska, our oak hickory woods kind of stop at the Missouri, right? Fontenelle Forest, Wabaunsee State Park, Indian Cave State Park. That's kind of the edge of the oak hickory forest where you'll find hen of the woods. But this baby was found down at Wilderness Park, just outside of Lincoln. So if you know areas in and around Omaha that has bur oaks, yeah, frequent those woods and look at the base, but watch for a half dead one or watch for one that's completely dead but still standing and has bark on it. Oftentimes it still has enough life in it to feed a mushroom. And those hen of the woods will take advantage of it. Funky looking thing, right? You look at that thing going, are you serious? Is that edible? But then once you peel it apart, what does it look like again? Chicken. It's my fave by far. And there again, that is like a football sized mushroom peeled apart becomes a lot. And so I got all that on the newspaper and then blanched it for 2 or 3 minutes and went ahead and froze them after that. And then I put them into serving sizes. Usually my serving size is, whatever, 1.5 cups, right? 2 cups. And when you cook them up and get that caramelized edge, I'm telling you, you could feed it to a meat eater and they think they were eating chicken because of the texture. So tasty. But again, the rule is if you find one, you have to high five whoever you're with. Okay, that's the rule. Or hug them, whatever turns you on. Yeah.
Just to clarify, so for most of these wild mushrooms, we'll blanch and freeze them to store them. And then when we're ready to cook with them, we rehydrate them and cook them.
Yeah, great question, Stephanie. Yeah, so after I blanch them and freeze them and I'm pulling them out and thawing them, you'll see there's a lot of water in the bag just from it coming out of the mushroom. So then I put them in my saute pan on medium low and I don't drain that water off. I'm going to concentrate the flavor, right? So I just put that on medium low and get all that water. First, the surface water comes out and then it comes out of the mushroom itself. And then I'm turning the heat up to medium high and adding my oil to get them that this color, if you will. Yeah. Yeah. And then they're great. Yeah.
Okay, so what season do these guys grow?
Yeah, great question, Nancy. What season do the hen of the woods? It's a good fall mushroom, Nancy. So you're going to want to think around frost time. Around Halloween time is a good time to go out and find hens. You can find them a little earlier than that. I would say just hunt for them throughout the month of October. Would be a good time. And during that month of October, if the moisture is good and all this and that, and I found one this fall, even with that drought. So it was still able to feed on that tree. So it doesn't take a rain to make mushrooms. It just makes your chances of finding more of them better, right? So that day you go out and look for hens, you might also find oyster mushrooms, or you might also find, wood-ear mushrooms, that type of thing. The pheasant back or dryad saddle, really one of the prettiest mushrooms out there, in my opinion. You can see where it gets its name, pheasant back. If you've ever seen the back plume of a pheasant feathers, really a pretty pattern. The thing is with pheasant back, if they get too big, they become unpalatable, in my opinion. And what chefs will say is you want to harvest them when they're very young. So that picture there on the right, my right, shows very young pheasant back or dryad saddles. Like the mushroom you're looking at is probably only inch and a half across. And then you basically can use a mandolin or a sharp knife to slice them very thin. Because the first time I cooked one up, I followed all my normal procedures and then ate a bite and it was like chewing on leather. It's like very chewy and hard. And I was like, not doing this one again. But I have friends that tell me it's their favorite. And if nothing else, this mushroom, if it becomes unpalatable texture-wise, they can be used like you would use bay leaf in a soup. So you would put this mushroom in a soup or creating your own broth. Say you're making your own homemade stock, for example, you would have these in the freezer just for a stock addition, if you will, because it's going to give you that nice mushroomy flavor. And then you just pull it out at the end so nobody's biting into that rubbery piece, if you will. But it's a really cool mushroom, and I'll harvest them even and dry them. Whoops, I'm going to go back one. That mushroom dries very well. I have some in my office at work just because it's just, You can stand them upright and they look really cool dried in the office. Oh, and then look at the underside of that mushroom. There's no gills. So that's what we refer to as a polypore. So they basically don't have gills, but they have thousands of little pores underneath there. Man, this young kid here in this picture, I think he just turned, God, what did he turn, 15? Look at that proud face, right? Have you guys ever seen giant puffballs? Oftentimes in grass, right? You'll even see them showing up at turf grass. And honestly, Nancy, most of the times the ones in turf grass, unless you're sure, yeah, they can get huge. It hasn't been sprayed or a lot of chemical on it. You know, I mean, you know your yard. If you aren't using chemicals, I would certainly trust harvesting it in my own yard. But absorbing any nastiness from the soil, I wouldn't trust it. But out in the woods, they're just fine. Giant puffballs are fun to look for because all you got to do is look for something that looks like a softball laying in the woods, or as they get bigger, a volleyball. It's like they're huge. There we are during puffball season. And Nancy, puffball season is usually an August, September thing. And again, we just try to go out. And the ones I'm holding, that's the perfect size, in my opinion, for harvest. Because they're tight all the way through. They're not soft and spongy. A puffball is past its prime. If I can kind of poke it with my thumb and the indentation stays there, it doesn't bounce back, then you know it's past its prime. Or if you break it in half, it'll kind of be yellow inside. Not a good sign. That means it's starting to go downhill. It's not fit for human consumption anymore. You just pass those by. They're more likely found in meadows and grasslands than in the forest, though. They are grown on the ground rather than up in trees. And you harvest those in late summer to early fall. And despite their large size, they grow quickly. And the fruit body will appear in about a week's time. And that's what they look like when they're split in half. Young giant puffballs have a white fleshy interior, but they become brown and discolored when past their prime and ready to release their spores. They're also not edible at that stage. And honestly, it's one of those mushrooms when you break in half or you find one, maybe I'm just weird this way. I'm very olfactory, but I always have to stick it up to my nose and breathe in deep because it just smells like food. Anyway, that's what they look like. And so if you're questioning, did I find a giant puffball? If you break it in half and it's creamy white all the way through, you can't mistake it for anything else. There's nothing else out there that would be a problem. But oftentimes when they get this big, they're too soft and mushy inside. But this one, that's my wife, Pat, the largest puffball I've ever seen. And you see it's covering her whole body, for the love of Pete. That thing was still in good shape. I couldn't believe it. We basically took it home and cut it in cubes and then blanched it. And my friend Brian taught me blanch it in stock. So he blanches his in beef stock or chicken stock. We blanch ours in vegetable stock now. And then blanching it, of course, cooks it down. We drain the water off and then freeze them to reuse it later. So you basically have this 1-inch cube that you've blanched that looks like a 1-inch cube of tofu now. So then you use it in any food like you would use tofu. You can fry tofu, you can bake tofu, right? You can grill tofu. You can just have tofu soft in a stir fry. You can do the same thing with the puffball. Actually, there's YouTube videos on all these things out there, you guys. So I encourage you to look at them. There's lots of mushroom nerds out there in the world, and they make YouTube videos out in the woods, how to identify them, all this and that. But there's a YouTube video of this guy making, I think I have a picture of it. Well, that coming up. Let's see if I find it. Oh, poo. Anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. Well, anyway, slices it about 1 inch thick and then marinated it and then put it on the grill. And then that became his pizza crust. Put all the pizza toppings on it. His friends didn't even know they were eating a mushroom. I thought it was classic. They said, dude, this is the best pizza I ever had. Now, we have not done that yet, but it's definitely on our bucket list. We didn't get any puffballs this last fall, much to our chagrin. The largest specimens on record, 59 inches across. Whoa, that's a mushroom, right? Maybe you've spotted a giant puffball in the woods. It looks like a brown soccer ball later in the fall. And if you dust it like that, you can see all the spores. And oftentimes you'll see people kicking them like a soccer ball in the woods. Maybe you've done it yourself. Please keep kicking them, kick them again and again and again and again and again, because you're releasing spores every time you do it. So whenever we find one, we kick it on down the trail, right? And just here, there, and everywhere. The spores are produced inside that ball. It's the spores that make the puff of smoke through an opening at the top of the ball when the puff ball is squeezed. It's pretty cool to see. Yeah, so there you can see the diced puff balls, blanched in soup stock, drain and freeze for long-term storage. Some say they have no real taste of their own and just absorb the other flavors around them, much like tofu. Others describe their taste as rich, earthy, and nutty. I would say they're definitely not horribly flavorful, but yeah, definitely have an earthy flavor to them. But what's funny is the picture you see on my left is when they're cut up fresh, and the one on the left is when they're in the hot stock. It's like they shrink up immediately. It's pretty wild to see when they absorb that. They're absorbing water, but yet they get smaller. And the reason that is because the air inside that mushroom is being displaced by the water and they're shrinking up. Yeah, the most popular way to eat them is to fry them in oil with a batter. So people will actually put a batter on them and fry them up. Sauteed or broiled alone or with other veggies. Dice them into smaller pieces and stir fry. Sliced into 1/2-inch thickness and use as a pizza crust. And this is another one that's on my bucket list to do. Remove the top and hollow out the mushroom into a bowl. Cook the hollowed out pieces with some other ingredients and place them back into the shell. Wrap the whole thing in foil and bake it in the oven, checking on it occasionally before it's done. There's a YouTube video out there on that, so check it out. It's pretty cool. They're excellent to cook and behave much better than many other mushrooms, mainly because they don't release masses of liquid when you put them in a hot pan. They are perfect to grill, and because their flavor is so mild, they're better with a good marinade. So there you see some grilled puff balls there in the picture, and of course some used in soup. But they fry up very well. They get that nice golden brown color to them. And again, you could serve that to, you know, in place of tofu. Great mushroom. Okay, it's a cousin out there called the pearl-shaped puffball. They often grow in clusters like this, but it's one of those things where usually I happen upon these pear-shaped puffballs when they're past their prime, and you can kind of touch the little ball and the spores. You can see that smoke coming out of it. That's a little spore release going on. Maybe you've seen those videos where they show a raindrop hitting one, and the raindrop hits the mushroom and it squirts out a little. That's nature's way of releasing the spores. It grows in large clusters again, but again, when you peel it open, it should be pure white. If it's not, don't bother to collect it. That's what they look like. They're pretty small, tasty little mushroom, like a mini puffball, if you will. Now, my favorite, the oyster mushrooms. You see these a lot in Oriental markets now, showing up more and more, and that's a good thing. It has what we call decurrent gills. So meaning those gills go all the way down. There's really no stalk on this mushroom. So the gills become part of the stalk, if you will. That's when you know you found a cluster of oysters. They often grow in a shelf-like formation where they're stacking on top of each other. So you have a big cluster. Several studies done on animals and in vitro suggest that its extracts maybe have possible medicinal applications for a wide range of conditions. So there again, they're good for you to eat. The best time of year is late summer into fall, but this is a mushroom we have found again every month of the year, darn near. It just depends if the conditions are right. They like highs in the 70s, lows in the 40s. And if we can get a 3-day stretch of that, because sometimes you'll get 70s and the 40s in July after a rain. You can even find them then. There's no poisonous look-alike for that mushroom to mistake it with any other. All oyster species are edible. There's a phoenix tail oyster, and this one you would recognize by its small size. In fact, this one tricked me once. It was so tiny, and that's my hand there. You see how little they are. I said, I'm not going to harvest you yet. I'm going to let you get a little bigger and then come back in a few days. When I came back in a few days, it was already spent past its prime. Like, dang it. Next time, I'm not going to wait. Just get it. Get it when you're there. They're much paler, smaller than the gray oyster, but what a pretty little mushroom, isn't it? A cute little guy. They're common, edible variety that's both cultivated and found in the wild. They favor the warmer weather. So you tend to see these more in the summer, these were probably found in July, August. And then you can see again, they're full of all sorts of goodies in them. It's a good mild mushroom. So it's a good one to introduce those people that don't think they like mushrooms. It's a great sauteed, stir fried, layered in sandwiches. Maybe you've had, a lot of people like portobellos, grilled portobellos. Oh, so good. These are also fantastic grilled and served in a hamburger bun or sandwich. But again, they're tiny, cute little mushroom. Well, you see it has a short stalk on it, but that stalk has what looks like gills. That's what we mean by decurrent gills. So there's Pat again, and that cluster that we found this day, we were out mushroom hunting in a different location. We get a call from Brian on the phone saying, "Hey, where are you guys at?" "Oh, we're hunting mushrooms." "Oh, we are too." And they said, "We got this big cluster of oysters. We got so many in the freezer. Do you want it? Where are you at?" So long story short, we made it to where they were and got this beautiful cluster. Again, mushrooms, they're like the paparazzi, they turn you into the paparazzi. When you have a cluster of mushrooms, always got to take a picture of them. But there you see how they were growing on the outside of that tree. So you see there's still bark on that tree. So there's areas of the tree that are barkless and areas that still have bark. Those are the ones to really look out for the oyster mushroom, because you see how that's growing out of that bark there. I peeled away the bark, that loose bark, and that's what was hidden behind that loose bark. So you can see the tree is still feeding on the bark that's attached to the tree, the cambium layer of a tree, right? We all know is growing on the outside portion of that tree. The mushroom, that's what it's feeding on, that cambium layer. Once the cambium layer is dead, no more mushrooms, or is there? The secondary mushrooms start showing up. Those bracket fungus start showing up. They usually will hit the serious dead wood on trees, if that makes sense. But the oysters grow in clusters. They can be down on the ground growing on a fallen tree, or they can be up in the tree too. And during a dry year, like we had last fall, you typically won't find them up on the tree just because it's so dry. You'll see them close to the ground where the humidity's higher. But they're a fun mushroom to process when you get home. Always in a good mood when I'm processing oysters. And there again, you see them first chopped fresh and then what they look like after they're blanched. So they're drying on newspapers, getting ready for the Ziploc bag. And there again, when I thaw them out, I finish them later with whatever I'm cooking them for. And then, of course, you don't have to blanch them and freeze them. I can cook them fresh too, which we often do that night when we get fresh oysters. They're gorgeous when they're cooked right. I've seen oyster mushrooms served at a potluck where they were pale and white and soggy looking. And I just went, you didn't do that mushroom justice. But that's why I took the time, you guys, to talk about cooking a mushroom properly. Then it looks much more appetizing to you and your guests. This one is the one I grew up hunting. This is what turned me on to wild edible mushrooms in the first place. I grew up in a little town in northeast Nebraska, Dodge, and we would hunt these mushrooms every fall. This mushroom shows up around frost time, so think around mid-October to late October is a good time to find these. And they're often growing out of living trees. And you can see this branch had broken off, so there's a little dead part of the mushroom or of the tree there. The mushrooms, again, coming out right of the cambium layer, but it had enough of an opening to get in there. I know a box elder mushroom hunter that worked, it was an arborist for the OPPD. The OPPD Arboretum at 108th and Blondo, they have a little natural woods next to it. Don't hunt there because Chris will probably be mad at you if you did. They would go in there and prune on those trees just to create open wounds for mushrooms to grow on. I thought that was pretty funny. It's not a true oyster mushroom, but it's often mistaken for one. And one of the common names is elm oyster. Well, I grew up calling it a box elder mushroom, so I'm going to still call it that. Because it grows primarily on box elder maples, but it'll also grow on dead elms too. hence the name elm oyster. And, you know, they can be in clusters like this, but more often than not, they're single. Just a nice single mushroom. And I've seen this mushroom in a good moist year, the size of dinner plates. It can be awesome. Great tasting mushroom, has its own unique flavor and smell. The stems are often pretty tough, so I usually just cut the stem away and eat the top portion. But certainly you can save those stems and use it for, again, soup stock. Yeah, October, November, they don't come out any other time. So it's a late season mushroom, gets you out in the woods when it's in the fall and you want to be out in the woods anyway. They're great sauteed, great steak mushroom, very meaty, a lot of good texture to them, a lot of body to this mushroom. They're just one of the best, period. Last year, for the first time, I ate shaggy manes. I had seen these before. You guys ever bumped into these out in landscapes? Yeah. Shaggy manes are a type of inky cap mushroom, and they can grow solitary or they can be in groups. They prefer hard ground and grassy areas with rich or disturbed soil. And you often will see them after a rain in the yard, and again, you just want to make sure you would be collecting in an area that never gets sprayed. That you harvest and eat them while they're young and the gills are still white. When young, it's an excellent edible, provided it is processed soon after picking. And what's funny is you pick this mushroom when it's in its prime there on the left, you can take it home and it'll start doing what you see in the middle within an hour or two. It starts to literally break down that quickly. And it'll literally melt away if you leave it long enough. So it's one of those mushrooms, when you see it, you got to get it, because if you come back tomorrow, you're going to be too late. And this is another mushroom that people will call it backyard farmer about 50 times a year, concerned that I think they're just concerned that I got this mushroom in my grass. How do I get rid of it? And they always say, wait a day or two and it'll be gone. Yeah, it's going to be gone. Why is the mushroom typically showing up in their yard? Typically, a tree has died. They took it down, ground out the stump, but all that root system is remaining behind, webbing underneath that turf grass, and then, you know, shooting out of the dying and decaying root zone from that dead tree. And it's funny, you can ask somebody if they got mushrooms coming up in their yard, did you have a tree that died a number of years ago? Yes. How did you know that? And then you explain it to them. They're like, oh, okay, I see. I've harvested oyster mushrooms in a busy intersection, 9th and N Street in Lincoln. I'm on my bike going down to some meeting and I have my backpack on me, and I'm riding by the sidewalk and I do one of these. Oops, sorry, I walked away from the camera. I do one of these looking down. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Big cluster of oyster mushrooms coming out of the ground. I'm like, what's going on here? So of course I got off my bike to observe. There was a tree that was cut down at ground level. That oyster was growing out of the cambium where that tree was cut at ground level. Man, so I proceeded. I'm like going, I'm not looking at the cars. So I didn't want somebody to make eye contact with me. So I just shoved it in my bag and hoisted it over my shoulder and said, nothing like urban foraging, you know, ate that puppy. It was good. So you can see they're harvested the white that they're talking about, and no other mushroom looks like that on the inside. So you're like, do I have the correct thing? If you open it up and see that image, because you can type in, because I had never eaten a shaggy before, had heard about them. Of course, I'm emailing a friend that knows his mushrooms, but I'm also reading up on them to see, can I mistake this for something that's poisonous? Yeah.
Not to ask too many questions today, but so that picture on the right where we see the mushroom split on the left side of that picture, it's got that like grayish coloration.
Right, right.
On the right doesn't. Is
Right.
the one on the left okay to eat still?
Good question, but I would probably bypass it simply because I'm not sure. One, and two, would it affect the flavor? I think it's safe to eat. It's just melting away. I don't think it's becoming poisonous as it's melting away, but honestly, I'd have to look that up to find out. My thing is, when I was there harvesting them, they were all white like that, so I didn't really have to make that choice. But I found it pretty fascinating. The bottom part of the skirt was turning black already within an hour of getting them home. So I blanched them up quick. And then I think we just ate them that night is what we did. It had a lot of water in it. So by the time I cooked them up, there wasn't a huge amount in my pan anymore. But it convinced me when shaggy manes are out, I'm going to get them. It's just one of those things where kind of a late summer, early fall thing. You could fry them in oil, butter, salt, and pepper, Parmesan crusted shaggy mains. If you look them up online, they're a delicacy, you guys. So they're worth checking out. Yeah, you can even, the taste of, oh yeah, here we go. I forgot about this, Stephanie. Here we go. The taste of scaly ink mushroom powder is delicate, subtle, and mild in aroma. So they actually let those things turn to that black ink and they'll dry it. And you can get it at Chinese markets. And I've actually seen, maybe you've seen that where they take squid ink pasta, right? Where it's like black and funky. I don't know if anybody's ever tried it before. I don't know if I'd be brave enough. Black pasta. But yeah, it's a thing. But I think it's something to definitely check out. This one, a lot of us have seen. This is what will typically show up in people's yards, the common inky cap. As the gills off and the caps digest themselves at maturity, turning into an inky black fluid that will drip to the ground. They look funky when they're all turning to liquid, don't they? It's like, ew, get this, they're edible. Now I cooked these up. Again, they were at their prime. They weren't blackened at all. Cooked them up. I mean, it was a whole full saute pan. There's so much water in them. I had, I think, a quarter cup of mushroom when I was done. I was like, yeah, you're edible, but you're not worth it. You're not worth my time. That's what they look like then when they start to decompose and eat themselves. Pretty cool. Yeah, and then this is another fact about this mushroom. It has coprine in it, and this is poisonous when consumed with alcohol, as it heightens the body's sensitivity to alcohol. For this reason, the inky cap has an additional common name, Tippler's Bane. I thought that was pretty funny. So back in the day, people were probably saying, oh, look at that, edible mushroom. And of course, they were drinking too and did them in, fatal, killed them. Here's the honey mushroom I was talking about earlier. I didn't know this mushroom till my friend Luke told Pat and I about it. We met him and went out and harvested these mushrooms. And even though I trust Luke up and down, I still went home and researched it. Is there anything I can confuse it with, that type of thing? And you see on the cap or on the stem of that plant, that ring that's going around it, that's kind of distinct, that fleshy ring that you see, that's distinct for honeys. And then the top of the mushroom, that brownish pattern that you see, that's where the name honey comes from. Somebody thought it looked like honey. And they do grow in clusters, very seldom singularly, and very, very late season mushroom. You can find this one typically in November. It's one of the last we'll go out and hunt for. And it grows in the clusters at the bases of trees or stumps over buried wood. It says August to November, but that's only if we have a cool stretch. We often will start looking for these in November. When you first find them, the cap is convex, but then they flatten out into a flattened mushroom. They have a thick stalk, which is whitish, becoming reddish brown, and it has that ring on the upper stalk. And then it has a spore print that is white. Is there any poisonous lookalikes? Yes, the deadly Gallerina is a smaller one with a smooth cap and a rusty brown spore print. So when in doubt, do the spore print. This would be the only one I would say that for. But then I looked up a picture or looked up deadly Gallerina online. You see the scale of that person's finger compared to deadly Gallerina. I wouldn't even bother to harvest that mushroom. It's too small to mess with, right? Whereas the honey mushrooms can be 3 inches across. So they're bigger, much bigger. But again, rather than doubting yourself, do the spore print, which I did on these that day. Nice looking underside on that mushroom. And then there you can see, if you happen upon a cluster like we did, do you see the dusting of white? So that was one mushroom spore print on top of another. So then I knew without a doubt it's a honey mushroom because of that white spore print. If that would have been a brown or a black spore print, I would have had the poisonous lookalike. So I knew without a doubt it was the baby I wanted. There's a lot of water in them, so you have to cook them for a long time to get that water out, but they're well worth it. Really a nice, rich, mushroomy flavor on the honey mushroom, but not very common, right? Has anybody ever heard of the honey? Certainly won't see them in stores. They're too perishable. So this is a good one you could forage in the wild. Fun mushroom to hunt. Honey mushrooms contain beta D glucan, vitamin B groups, 15 amino acids. So due to its intracellular beta glucan contents, the honey mushroom extract helps protect the cell from free radical oxidation damage as well as maintain a healthy immune system. What that means is you can Google honey mushroom extract and order it online. So that's pretty cool. This is another very late season mushroom. What I was doing, you guys, when I started the whole talk, I was starting in the early spring with the morel, taking you all the way up to November. The velvet foot, also called enoki, Enoki mushroom, is one you'll often find in December in Nebraska. So pick a nice, decent, warm December day. And remember, back in December, we had highs in the 50s. That would have been a good time to go hunting for enokis or the velvet foot. It's a pretty mushroom, looks kind of similar, right, to that honey mushroom, a little darker in color. This picture doesn't, it's hard to tell, but this one, they're very thick and leathery. Their texture is very leathery. Okay, now quick about polypore mushrooms. They're a bracket fungi and they encompass a host of species. It's a large and diverse genus of polypore mushrooms like the dryad saddle. The best rule to follow is to use your foraging knife, and if you find one that is tough to remove, then leave it. If you can just peel it right off easily, then it's still good. That's what they look like on the underside. The pores are barely visible. It almost looks smooth. The trick for tender dryads is to slice them very thin, as in near transparent, and then add them to a soup or a ramen dish. Whoopsie. Now there's the artist conch. You've probably seen this in nature. Hopefully, it's a very popular mushroom to photograph because it's so beautiful. It always has that beautiful creamy white underside and that nice brown top. Also called artist conch. Artist conch is appropriately named because people will often harvest this mushroom and do artwork on it. You can take your fingernail on the underside of a fresh conch and just paint with your fingernail or draw with your fingernail. In fact, they're very difficult to get off of a tree without bruising that underside and ruining the artwork that you could create with it. My son's an artist and I want to get a big one to him someday. The thing is I have to get it to him in a timely manner because once it dries, then it's going to be hard to scrape it. But while it's fresh, any little, I guess, fine little needle-like thing you use. I don't even know what the artist used to do this, but there's some impressive work. Just Google artist conch artwork and you'll go, dang, I had no idea. It's another cosmopolitan species, meaning it grows all around across the world. The fruiting bodies are perennial and may persist for multiple years, increasing in size and forming new layers of pores as they grow, much like an annual ring on a tree. So they'll keep getting bigger every year. The peculiarity of this fungus lies in its use as a drawing medium for artists. And in China, they use it as a flavor enhancer because of its rich mushroom flavors. So again, for making for stock, and this is something I haven't done yet, I would always just pass up the artist conch thinking it's just another polypore. But then I found out it can be used as a soup base because it'd be like eating cardboard. It's so hard and tough. Okay, I got like 4 minutes left, I see. This one, you remember the movie and the book, Gorillas in the Mist? Diane Fossey, who studied the mountain gorillas over in Africa. This is an interesting thing she wrote in her book. Still another special food for the gorillas is a bracket fungus. That scientific name, you guys, is the artist conch. The shelf life projection is difficult to break free, so younger animals often have to wrap their arms and legs awkwardly around the trunk and content themselves by only gnawing on its delicacy. The older animals who succeed at breaking it loose have been observed carrying it several hundred feet from its source, all the while guarding it possessively from more dominant individuals' attempts to take it away. Meaning, if a silverback spotted a mama bringing back this mushroom from 300 yards away, he's going to go steal it from her. What I find interesting is both the scarcity of the fungus and the gorilla's liking of it cause many intergroup squabbles, a number of which are settled by the silverback, who simply takes the item for contention for himself. So get this, artist conch has been studied. It's a medicinal mushroom. It has anti-tumor, antibacterial, immune-enhancing properties. You suppose the gorillas know that? I have a feeling they do. Now, they don't know it's called anti-tumor or immune-enhancing properties. All I know is it probably helps them feel better. So what I like to do when I find an artist conch in the woods, I might harvest one and scrape with my fingernail. Bob was here, or say hello. I've done that to a dude. I was visiting Arbor Lodge, and there was an artist conch coming out of a trunk, and Brad was working there. I was there to harvest some chestnuts. So I wrote down there, "Hi, Brad, Bob was here," and asked him a couple days later if he saw that. Or no, this is how it went down. He took a picture of it and texted me saying, "Hey, Bob, was this you?" I thought it was great. So you can leave little positive notes in the forest, right? Leave it better than you found it, right? Tread lightly. But there's your common bracket fungus that you guys have all seen out in the woods. Get this, they're edible. They're just not very palatable. But you can use them. That's what the underside of it looks like, a polypore. So how did nature invent that complex structure? Doesn't that blow your mind how intricate it is? There's the lumpy bracket fungus. And there you can see the intricate underside. Just a few poisonous ones. There's the deadly Gallerina I was showing you earlier, very small mushroom. The green spored polypore is easily the most common mushroom for poisoning people in the United States. And you see it's coming out of a lawn. So you're going to want to make sure you distinguish this between a shaggy mane. This is what I was worried about when I found the shaggy mane. Was it a green polypore? Well, it's called green spored for a reason. Guess what its spore print looks like? It's green, right? Whereas the shaggy mane melts. The caps have concentric circles, are pinkish to whitish scales. And there again, you see the underside of that mushroom already turning green. So that's a good sign. Stay away. All right, that's it, you guys. I actually made it right on time. All right, does anybody have any questions? All right, well, hopefully I inspired you to go out. Again, the low-hanging fruit is the oyster mushroom. You know, a lot of those other ones can be a little more challenging to find, but that oyster mushroom, it's common. My brother said up in Dodge, because we never hunted it as a kid because we didn't know what it was. Well, he said around here we call it the willow mushroom because it often grows on dead willows in clusters. So you'll see it on willows, elms, box elders. I've seen it on hackberry. I've seen it on honey locust. It'll feed on a lot of different dead trees. So let that be your low-hanging fruit. And there's a couple of sites you should belong to. One is called on Facebook. One is called Nebraska Mushrooms. And then another one's called Nebraska Mycological Society. The Mycological Society, they're pretty serious folks, but a great group to belong with. They have mushroom forays at Wilderness Park every year, kind of like a mushroom bio blitz in Wilderness Park. There's a fellow that works there in Wilderness Park, Chance Bergaman, who I'm having on my radio show at the end of May. Chance comes on once a year to talk about mushrooms. And how cool would it be to be this kid, born and raised in California, now lives in Nebraska, works at Indian Cave doing the prescribed burns, the woodland burns. And what they're finding with these woodland burns, the amount of fungus that's showing up, the fungi that has basically doubled in numbers from what they were seeing before these prescribed burns. So it's really intriguing. He has brought mushrooms to the, much like plants have an herbarium, we also have an herbarium for mushrooms. And he has already found in Nebraska 60 new species of mushroom that were never cataloged before. That's pretty telling. And pretty cool to be something in your 30s. You know, he's not even 30 years old to say, I've discovered new species in the world, huh? Not a lot of us can say that. But it's just good stuff. So I encourage you to join Nebraska Mycological Society. They're a good group. Thanks for your time, you guys.
Thank you so much. That was exceptionally well done. And you went through that as fast as you could to get in that time and have a whole lot more information. So we're sorry we had to condense it to get it all in. But I want to thank all of you for being here. My name is Don Preister, and I've been with Green Bellevue for a while. We have programs like this for those of you watching on Zoom. We have one once a month. We'll have another one in March. We've got our April programs where we'll be doing Arbor Day, Earth Day, and other activities. We welcome your participation. We welcome your involvement. If you would like to be more involved, we've got our website with lots of information. If you're interested in t-shirts, I've got some t-shirts in the back of the room that we can sell you those. Please feel free to socialize a little bit. Thank you, Ruth, for being the president and coordinating things. Stephanie, thank you for putting the program together. Bob, thank you. And to all of you, would you reach your hand up and point your palm backwards? Reach over and pat yourself on the back for being good environmental people. And Stephanie, any last words?
I was encouraged by Ruth to come up here and remind everyone, we have a schedule of programs that we're planning for this year. And next month might be of special interest to you. We are planning on getting a representative from the Big Garden to have a presentation or teach a program on how to grow vegetables at home. So just kind of giving tips and advice and hands-on content about starting up a vegetable garden. So if that's of interest to you, definitely keep in touch with following us on social media or checking our website for more details. So thank you for coming, everybody. That was honestly, it was like better than I imagined.
I'm doing that somewhere else. Yeah.
Love you.
You know, hate that. Something that just feels like that you haven't had left to the I just no longer you're out the more. They appreciate it for us. They get out there. Yeah. I mean, you know, they'll like, you know, and even then we're, between, we'll take it. Oh my God. Yes, oh my gosh, you know, places,
But you gotta be.
Yeah. There's a cafeteria was down there and first conjugation very far downtown, like 36 and lower.
You know, I think that sounds like. Yeah. It's called, but it's really close to but it's like legitimate.
Yeah, yeah.
Legitimately. You know, it's still.
Yeah, yeah. Well, there's a Unitarian church down there too, right down by.
Okay.
Yeah, that one's not, doesn't seem, but it's out there. Yeah, is it? Okay, so older. For
Yeah,
sure.
it's old. But it's not, it's not.
I don't have a lot of.
It's stained glass.
Like
There's a church now. It's not like stained glass.
I would think
Well,
everybody's garden here in the backyard.
Oh, okay, yeah, yeah. That's awesome.
So,
Yeah, I love that. I saw when you first planted, walking around, you know,
I think that's.
you know, activity down in the downtown area. You know, old warehouses.
Yeah, definitely.
You know, we were in Midtown, we were at a restaurant and across the street, we went, you know, around. Things, you know, businesses. So you saw, light up.
Yeah.
And then for about half an hour before we get home, and then you saw the lights go down, and then people came up the street at the restaurant area. It's like, oh, that is just what you thought in that downtown area. Their sense of that they have a community. Yeah, it's really amazing.
I think you posted this. Thanks, Ben. I'm recommending the manager. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, really? Yeah, it's just fun. Are you talking about the fungi? They're like meatball.
Yes.
Wait, what is it all? Okay, so I, no, I know. At least I know what it is. I keep finding them on my card. I'm like, what is this thing? All right, well, I'm glad I caught that. Yeah, I was just thinking our teachers. Yes. I teach in the field too. I teach months. The grants and activities director. He said, oh, that meeting went really well. I said, what meeting?
Yeah, but I work and we.
Your daughter should have been the admin. She had bullshit. So who was like?
That's why.
But I found okay, well, so I gotta figure out what I will know. She just goes into this.
Newspapers?
One of my former students used to run the state elementary school. Who has all went to yes, that Warner. Yes, we got Warner talking about for a while. Sometimes Kat has this awesome story. Oh, she wanted to work in the sustainability office and then she would be outside the door.
I know, so like also. Well, yeah, she was one of the first.
Yeah. We just asked if we don't know, not any. He was much more without the video, which nice. Because he had like. That's all right. In third place. I wonder if some of Ford sells any other too. They just sell like that. They went before they.
That's why I say. Hiking around and see.
I'll have to. I'll look, 'cause I'm gonna go to Lawrence.
Usually what they want to see is, well, if you show them. So take one of the ones on the other side.
Yeah, the rest of it.
Fine. That's cool. It's.
So it's a dead ass, you know, and then it starts to die.
But, well, I know, but yeah, like literally like at like 125, there's like, I was wrong or something. And then everyone just poured in the last 5 minutes.
But I didn't know how to.
Yeah, I was like, I don't know, I said.
Well, when I saw it, you know, I saw it like, it's a way. And I just happened to be there. Yeah, it was really.
And then you're like, how the hell is that? You'd be surprised.
Yeah. I tried to freeze it and I tried to eat, you know, and I didn't really have enough. Process to so blanching it, you know, just without with it and they get stopped. Just that's just a few minutes. Yeah, and then you're cutting those up, shredding.
First of all, exactly.
It's so large. But it wouldn't let them off.
Yeah.
Maybe the taste is nothing, you're using knives, takes anyway or something.
That's the one that I.
What is this?
Yeah.
Oh, what?
Yeah, exactly. I have to twist mine up.
Yeah, it was supposed to size like that.
Green Belt program.
You need to stop by.
So yeah, we'll be in the humanities.
That's all, you know.
But they.
What's that?
I didn't see it.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Better if we stay in the same.
Yeah, and shoot, like, you know, there's, you know, as many people as that work here today, we would be too large for that. Yeah. I really have put together.
It's like that.
Here.
It seems to sell.
They like-
More and more.
February, we can do
Kind of compliance.
something.
Out of the country, so.
Really any time, any, okay, obviously I have a ton.
Yeah.
Program. So what would be a good, maybe big house is signed in.
Well, yeah, 24,
Okay,
Meaning.
so probably like we're looking to like. And
Yeah,
we're like. In July.
And we're going to the Arbor Day proclamation. Yeah.
Yeah.
We passed it.
Okay.
No, but July, August. Granted, he would be passed like,
No, Tommy, she said
Say
you
you
want to hold your fire down.
yeah.
She said, you know,
Ohio, you know, talking about. That's exactly.
I was saying, it's a very, it's a vibrant.
So yeah, that would be like the second to last one. Either vegetables with.
No.
Pollinators.
Maybe not the wrap, the sheer wrap of that are in the top, so that we have a nice little catalog. And then maybe next year, we still have like.
3 years.
You're talking, is this for your comment?
Yeah, this is podcast. Yeah, this is,
Gotcha.
yeah,
Yeah,
so
that's-
July, June, okay, okay, but like from here on out. Even if like, February, even if I and then he put them broadcast it.
Let's say this. That's so right.
Okay.
We have that.
So basically from the 20th on.
Yeah.
We could, because I know that we had some stuff already prepped from when we had to like kind of shut down and we could like.
Well, I had a neighbor that didn't have a shoot down at one point.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was picturing.
So I was wondering, you know.
Yeah, I can set my computer and talk.
Okay, cool.
Oh,
And then
yeah.
that, even if we do it way early, then that gives me time all month to do the edit and put it on. So, yeah, I can get.
Yeah, right. Yeah, right.
Yeah. We gotta jump back in. It's kind of hard getting back into something when you stop.
Yeah, cause it's like something about like that radio show and now I think they look at the schedule and something.
Yeah, it's more than
I
that,
did a couple of solo show, that's like the last 2 weeks. I decided,
yeah.
they're fine, but because you just gotta talk,
I know,
you don't get the same.
I know. I do the monologue episode. I'm like. So it's much more so that's what. Well, I honestly, I did the monologue stuff because I was irresponsible and didn't book. So I'm like, oh, all this stuff, okay, so I thought, okay, you know, micro queries, you know, but. But yeah, it's always, always fun. And that's how weird stuff comes up. You're like, oh, so, and then it's just like snowballs. Cool, thanks for making that.
Yes.
I just sat here, this is for gas, and I'm like.
I think. Hopefully. Whatever.
So then,
Cool. Well, I gotta head back to the Super Bowl. Yeah.
Thank you. What happened?
yeah, but I did not.
Not yet.
Hey, guys, it's not connected. Bye.
Yeah, there's
But
someone was saying.
I got-
Nancy Caruso is the director, one of the directors at Multi Brothers. She was saying, you know, the muralist. And then there's another guy, I actually figured out, but I didn't get a chance to talk to her. She had attended, found it meeting.
Yeah, well.
She's not been private. Like, I know a place I could reach out to, so I think we're kind of like, get a contract. And I'm gonna send a follow-up to South Carolina, and they get possible, like,